Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Author Your Life podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Carolyn George. Carolyn has been a management consultant for over 20 years. She started her first marketing agency when she was 27 years old, working with clients that included the Telegraph, Gillette, Papermate, the Royal National Institute for the Blind, and many more. During the early 90s, she was the Managing Director of ChaseCom and was responsible for licensing the first wireless LANs in the UK. At the same time, she started the RTTC, Real Tennis Tournament Company. The Champagne Laurent Perrier Masters ran at the prestigious Queen's Club in London, attracting many famous names to its audience, champagne tastings, and corporate hospitality. Laurent Perrier was the sponsor for 10 years, and His Royal Highness Prince Edward came along on finals night each year to present the prizes. Since then, Carolyn has spent most of her time supporting others to do what they do best. From doctors' practices to training companies, from charities to cheesemakers. During that time, she's been asked to sit on boards and even became CEO of Street Child Africa. In our interview together, you will learn you must commit to a passion every day, to reward yourself when you've done something difficult, the importance of using movement to start your day, why listening is the best gift you can give someone, and that you have to take responsibility for your life. So without further preamble, please enjoy this interview with Carolyn George. So, Carolyn, welcome to the Author Your Life podcast.
Hi David, how are you?
Carolyn, why did you become a business coach?
Well, it was by accident, like so many things in my life. I started my first business when I was 24 years old. I employed my first people when I was 27 years old. I started a couple of other businesses. I became a CEO. I was asked to become CEO of someone else's company. I was director of another company. So by the time I had my children, when I was in my early 30s, I'd got a reasonable amount of business experience, particularly starting up businesses and small businesses behind me. And I wanted to work flexibly. So initially, I actually started off as a marketing coach because that was my experience. My first company where I employed people was a marketing agency. But then a friend of mine said, would I help her set up her business? Which I did, and then she recommended me to someone else, and I helped him. And then there was a company that was in difficulty, and I helped them. And suddenly, I wasn't a marketing coach at all. I was a business coach. So that's how it started. And it was also, I realised, through just the first 3 or 4 people I spoke to, a lot of business coaches, a lot of professionals, particularly in those days, it's definitely got better in the last few years, talked terribly seriously, confused people with science. And I've actually started to call myself a translator because I would go with my clients to bank managers and accountants and lawyers, and we'd come out and so many of them said, what am I supposed to be doing? Because they really hadn't taken it in at all, and no one had said, do you understand, or made any allowance for the fact that actually, in fact, one of them was a chocolate maker, brilliant at making chocolate, but he hadn't got a clue what the bank manager was expecting him to do. So I then started to specialise in just being accessible and helping people to understand. And I realised there was a big market to just put things, action plans together in a way that people could understand and they had some hope of achieving. You know, it's all very well saying you can borrow £200,000 and your APR is 1 point, whatever it might be, and most business owners just go, you know, you could just see their eyes going dead. But if you say, actually, you have to earn this amount of money and you need to put this amount aside every month to pay it off, you can understand what that means.
Yeah.
So that's how I started, really, by accident.
It's funny how a lot of people's stories start like that. There's a accident and serendipity involved.
Yes, yeah, it is, and I enjoyed doing it, and it meant I also got to see. I'm quite nosy. I love seeing what other people are doing, and I've come across amazing projects. You know, people who are chocolate makers, I said, and a yogurt and ice cream maker was another one. Training companies, doctors, surgeries, manufacturers who made parts for cars, and I've recently just been working with someone from Africa, helping him write his business plan. He's over here finding out how to use recycling to produce energy, because he wants more and more African countries or towns to actually be able to have electricity, because they don't, but they can do it from waste. So whole range of different companies, and of course the charities as well. I love it. Yeah.
So I'd like to pick apart that story a little bit more, and I know there's a record that you hold. Would you mind sharing what that record is?
Oh God, you're going to have to remind me there, David. What is that?
Something about a radio transistor.
Oh, a wireless LAN. Well, it's not a record. Yes, we bought ChaseCom was the company I was asked to be CEO of, and we were the first people to bring wireless local area networks into the UK. Yes, I was running around, still in my late 20s at the time, they didn't have nice little tablets at the time, luggables they called them, and I remember running around Heathrow Airport to prove that I could stand one side of a runway and you could have the office on the other side of the runway, and we could talk to each other, we could send each other messages. Yes, that was me. I was there. And also a big use in the City of London and hospitals, where rewiring, you know, is a huge job if you're trying to get some of these beautiful but very old buildings in London wired. Hideous to try and do that, but you could use it by wireless. So yeah, that was me first, and we got them licensed in the UK. That was what we achieved in 1990.
Well, there we go.
Yes.
If you hadn't brought the internet to the UK,
you and I would not be speaking like this. And I do remember, because one of in fact, the person that asked me to look after the company in the first place now lives in Spain, and he moved to Spain a long time ago. I remember he was sitting in his garden in Spain, and I was sitting in my garden in Hampton, in West London, and no wireless, nothing attached. And he said, couldn't have done this if it hadn't been for running around Heathrow, lugging computers around saying, we can talk to each other. Yes.
There we go. Well, thank you for making this conversation possible.
Well, I think someone else would have done it if I hadn't. But yes, it is one of those things. And in fact, because it was just one of those, it just happened. I keep forgetting that it is actually quite important to so many people. Yeah.
So you've helped a lot of people along your journey. I'm sure you meet a lot of people who have a passion. They have this yearning desire to do something in the world, to bring something into the world. But as I've experienced myself personally, and I'm sure you've observed as well, you need more than the passion. You need the structure and the strategy to make it happen. Do you notice any common mistakes or patterns in people who are passionate about something but struggle to make that passion a reality?
Well, there's two or three things. And when I run my business planning courses, I always start off with, and it's, some people get irritated with me, but almost everyone enjoys it once we get going, is why do you want to start this business? Because it's all very well having a passion. I mean, just because you like talking, David, doesn't mean that you can be organised enough or really have enough interest in enough things to make a business from it. And so while being passionate is really helpful in a business, and it will certainly help you sell your business as you move on, we're all attracted to passionate people. Someone, I'm trying not to be too boring as I'm standing here talking to you. If someone's passionate, they're much more fun to listen to, and they're much more fun to work with. But that is really only one half of the business. The biggest thing that people really don't realise, despite all the books there are out there and everyone has told them, you've got to get up every morning and do something that is going to help your business. And it's not always fun stuff. We've talked already about some of the stuff I enjoy doing. I like talking. I like talking to other people. I like finding out what's going on. But you've got to do the things to do with the admin. You've got to, when it's not particularly nice day, get out there and go to a seminar that you're not particularly interested in, but there's going to be a few people there who might be interested in working with me. I've got to go and talk to an awful lot of people who aren't so fun to work with. I've been really lucky, and I would say that 90% of my businesses that I've worked with, I've actually really enjoyed working with them, but I think I'm very lucky. But even in there's been that smattering of people who are just obstinate and bolshy and negative. I hate dealing with people who are negative. But I've still got to go along, and I've got to be upbeat, and I've got to encourage them, even though they just sit there and say, but you can't do it like that, it doesn't work like that, that's not, And that's what I think a lot of people don't realise. Whether you like it or not, you've still got to put one foot in front of the other. And just if it's a hobby, you don't have to, but if this is going to be your livelihood, you've just got to suck it up and carry on, whether you're enjoying yourself or not. Especially when you're starting out, because you've got to keep encouraging people. I have to keep encouraging people to do what they're doing. Other people have to keep selling their products, even if they're not real salesmen. You're selling yourself all the time, and it is hard work.
Yeah, do you have any insight into how you can apply yourself in that way? If I think of the psychology literature, for example, a lot of things again talked about things like growth mindset and grit, which is passion and perseverance put together. And there's a lot talked about in the literature of you should have a growth mindset and you should have grit. And there is some applicable strategy into how you develop these things. For you and your experience, do you have any advice on how you develop that ability to get up every day and do what needs to be done?
Well, there are a few things I do, and I do them automatically now, and then there's a few things when I have to I'm struggling and I have to pull myself into it. I have to start off by saying I am tremendously lucky. I am a curious person. I am an enthusiastic person, and it doesn't take too much to get me interested. I love talking to the Friday nights. We go out, for people who don't know, we go out on a Friday night, last Friday of the month. We go for drinks and usually have sort of 20, maybe a few less people come along. Lots of people come there for the first time, and I genuinely enjoy finding out what they're doing and what their project is, and I'm interested. So I think I'm a fairly open person, and that definitely helps. I was born that way. But I'm there were still things that I struggle with, and I'm a morning person, so I like getting up in the morning. Not so much on the 21st of January when it's snowing outside and freezing cold, but I get up every morning and I do 15 minutes yoga. And I've just discovered, I remember going back to when I was 17, 20, 25, going to yoga classes, and after work, and I'd sit outside and I think, I don't want to do this, 8 o'clock at night, I want to go home, I'm hungry, I don't want to do this. But after every single class, without exception, I walked out of there and I thought, gosh, I feel better. Just doing something physical early in the morning really does help the mindset. And I know there's an awful lot of people saying, ugh, straight away, but you know, it does. You get out of bed, you're feeling stiff, you're feeling a bit crabby, you start stretching, you start doing some movement. The other thing I do, which, you know, I wouldn't want an audience for this one, but I have the radio on and I dance. Yeah. It really helps if I think I've got something and I don't want to do it today, finding a good record, music, whatever it is, and dancing really helps get me in the right frame of mind to deal with whatever. So and I, as you know, I've got 2 dogs, so I walk them every morning as well. So probably before most people have got up, because I do get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, sometimes even earlier in the summer. You know, I've done all of that before breakfast, and that just helps me feel good because I feel like I've won. I don't know what I've won, but I feel like I'm ahead. I hate getting up late and rushing and getting to an appointment just on time and diving in and feeling, if I can actually do all of that in the morning beforehand, you know, I've emptied the dishwasher or whatever I've done as well, and I'm ahead. If I can then, and I do really try to do this, I know it's, you've written about this as well, David, I try, and then if I've got something I don't want to do in the sense of writing or a phone call, I really do try and get that done first. You know, I'm up, I've got myself into a reasonably good mood, I can speak to that grumpy person, or I can write that email that I'm feeling slightly uncomfortable about, whatever it is. So yeah, I will try normally by 9:30 in the morning, and I can see lots of people say, you have to be joking. 9:30 in the morning, I've got a lot of that stuff done.
Yeah.
Makes a big difference. And then at 9:30, if it's really been tough, if I've had to really have a tough conversation, I will treat myself. You know, that might be anything from, I usually drink black coffee, I might go and treat myself to a hot chocolate and a Danish pastry, or it might be going for a walk with the dogs in the sunshine, whatever, you know, I'll do something nice. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely a believer in the little rewards as well. Yeah. Along those lines. And the other thing is, you just put one foot in front of the other. There have been times in my life, you know, as a single mum, my children were very young, we split up, my partner and I split up when the youngest one was just 18 months and my oldest son was 3. And there were some pretty tough, you know, that having children is tough, and there were some pretty tough times there. I was self-employed, and there were times, I have to say, when you just have to say it's one foot in front of the other. So, you know, I really became very good at breaking things down. So if I did have a difficult conversation to have, I would write down what had to be said or what had to be accomplished by the end of it, and then I'd go and have a cup of coffee or whatever it might be, and then I'd come back and I'd actually practice saying a couple of things and going through in my mind some of the responses that I might get and how I would handle it, and then I'd go and empty the washing machine, and then I'd come back and I'd pick up the phone and I'd dial it, and do you know what I mean? It wasn't, I was prepared to do it. there are just some things you do just have to tear off that band-aid as fast as you can and get on with it. And the feeling afterwards is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And remembering that. I mean, that does come a bit with experience. Now I know, the same as doing my yoga every morning, I don't always feel like getting up and doing yoga, but I do know that afterwards I'm going to feel so much better. You know, dancing around the bedroom is not a particularly attractive thing to do when you sort of get out of bed, but gosh, I feel quite good afterwards, you know, especially if I add some singing at the top of my voice to it. You've suddenly got a very different opinion of me now, David.
No, not at all. I recommend dancing as one of the most effective quick interventions you can do for shifting your mood and shifting your state. It's a physical shift, it's an emotional shift as well when you get connected to a song that you like. And what I recommend is picking a song that has an emotional memory attached to it as well. So you went to see them live, it's a song that reminds you of a particular person or a particular holiday,
a film or whatever it was. And if you add some singing to that, you know, then it's even better. I did join a choir for a while. Actually, in Bristol, I've recently stopped going, which I must go back to. And I have to say the same thing. I did enjoy. You know, I went along there and singing, a group of 40 people singing together. That's also. I mean, I'm not a great singer, by the way. You know, I can hold a tune. Also, tremendously uplifting. Especially when you go and do a performance, which we did occasionally. Great mood lifter. So I'm into all of those things. And when I used to run as well, that was another thing that was a huge. If I had a knotty problem or I'd had a really bad day, going out and running 3 or 4 miles with the dogs in the evening, brilliant way of busting whatever's been going on. And especially with the dogs who think they're just having a wonderful. Who think I'm a wonderful person no matter what I do, you know, and they're having a great time. So yeah, I have a whole. I don't really think about it very often because I do it automatically now. But I do have a whole range of mood lifters or mood busters, whichever way you want to think of it. Yes, you've just got to act like a crazy person.
I might make that the title of the podcast. Might get a little bit more traffic or a little bit less. I don't know.
Crazy is no bad thing, actually, because the amount of times, especially when I first started my first business, I can't tell you how many people told me at the age of 24, female, age of 24, why do you want to do that? That's daft. That's, you know, when I started, when I gave in my job, my well-paid job, my company car, and started my own business and paid other people, well, my parents included, and I can't even begin to think how many people told me I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
When I started doing real tennis tournaments, which was completely different. Again, one of the things I did when I was 27, just after I started the agency, I started organising real tennis tournaments, and the company was called the RTTC, the Real Tennis Tournament Company, at Queen's Club. And I started doing it because I knew a few people that played real tennis, and this is one of my faults, I have to say, not something particularly good, is I'm inclined to look at something and think, it can be done better than that. I can do that. So it was one of those. So I got Laurent Perrier champagne. They came and sponsored it. Prince Edward came and delivered the prizes very nicely. We did it for about 7 years, and he turned up every year and presented the prizes. Completely different. Working with people who weren't used to having cameras. You know, it's a fairly conservative sport with lots of people who aren't used to being. Let's say it goes through public schools and fairly different sort of people play it. So me doing all of this and selling tickets and bringing money into the game and getting it on TV, it was on Channel 4, quite a few comments I went through with that one. And so yeah, little crazy. I don't think is a thing, to be perfectly honest.
There's something I'd like to link back to, which might well tie in with what you've just been talking about there. You're talking about having to do everything as a single mum, combining being a mum, running a business, and at a time when I suspect it wasn't as easy to run a business as it is now, certainly as a single woman as well. Funnily enough, we had a guest on a little while ago who's also a single mum who runs her own business, a mumpreneur. I believe the new word is a mumpreneur. And I was asking her basically how on all God's earth did she do it. She had 3 kids, she was running her own business, and I'd like to ask you the same thing. How did you manage to balance your commitments as a mother and your commitments to running your own business as well?
Well, that is where the just putting the one foot in front of the other came into it an awful lot, because there were times when I did sit there and think, I don't know how to do this. You say a time running my own business was different, and actually going back to the 80s and 90s, I'm not even sure the word entrepreneur was, it's a dirty word. It hadn't got the pizzazz it's got possibly nowadays, and there was no one to help me. There were, the government now has realised that something like 20% of the income for the UK is brought in by businesses with less than 50 employees. In those days, there was no support at all, so it was very different. I did it because I'd already started my own business, come to that, but I actually became more self-employed and did more things. It fitted in with being flexible with the children. I can honestly say I've got 2 boys, I never missed a football match or a rugby match or a swimming girl or a Christmas concert or a harvest festival event or whatever it was. Luckily mobile phones were around during most of that, so an awful lot of conversations. I was somewhere I pretended not to be. So that helped a lot with clients. Yes, of course I'm in my office. As I was actually watching a swimming gala or something. And I just structured my time. Just thinking back to it, I haven't thought of this for a little while. I know it took me 2 years. I always said it took 2 years to get organised, and the children were quite young at the time. They were, when I was working, they were allowed to come into my office. I had someone looking after them if they were at home, but we had a kiss and we had a cuddle, and then they had to leave. So I had to be quite strict. It was only for a few hours a day. That's when I first started to get up in the morning. I did a lot of my work between, would you believe, 5 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock, and then in the evening as well. I'm not a very good evening person. My children went to nursery school, which was great. I believe in children going out and being sociable anyway, so that's fine. And then I have to say I was very lucky. I was able to afford having a nanny when I had 2 of them. It was actually cheaper to have a nanny than it was to have daycare type situations. Nanny was cheaper. And I had to do that because I was travelling abroad by that time. I was travelling to Toronto and Poland and Russia and America and things, so I had to have someone stay with them overnight. So as they got older, I did have a nanny as well. But even so, you still, nannies don't work 24-hour days. They work 8-hour shifts like everyone else does. So you just have to learn to work around it. I became very good at making creative picnics, because we went to an awful lot of both my boys played a lot of sport, a lot of cricket, a lot of rugby, so yeah, to be perfectly honest, I just did it. If There were moments where, I would be having a telephone conversation because it had to be done at 10 o'clock in the morning and I had no child cover, and, I did shut myself in the bathroom a couple of times because that was the only way I could do it. And I had to be actually, one of the biggest things I learned was you can't both look after children and work at exactly the same time, because you get crabby with the children and they're unhappy and you're frustrated because you can't get anything done, and the work doesn't do very well. So I did, even before I had a nanny, I just allocated slots. So the children at nursery school between and that's when I would work, and I would try and get as much into that as I possibly could. But when I had the children, I did not work at weekends. I never worked. I finished on Friday night, and my weekends were always devoted to my children. We did lots together. We played. I loved playing with them. We went swimming, we went for walks, we had picnics, whatever it was, but the weekends were absolutely, and I never went away for work that involved being away at the weekends either. I was always home for the children. So I was terribly organised, tremendously, rigidly organised, and made the children still know that they were number one in my life. If they were happy, then my work was a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, all I can say is huge admiration and appreciation for those efforts. I can't imagine being in that situation, but I guess when you're there, you do just find a way, as you said.
You do just do it. You have to have rules, which I wouldn't. Not particularly good at rules, but you have to have rules for the children, and both my children are a delight, and they were at the time, and I was very lucky, but because they knew their boundaries, we didn't really have any huge upsets. They knew that if I was in the office, which was an upstairs bedroom at the time, then I was working, and they could come in if I wasn't on the telephone and have a quick cuddle and a chat, but then they had to disappear. Even, that's when they were 7 or 8 or 14 or whatever. But that was also, made possible. I think they appreciated it because when I was with them, there was no mobile phone, there was no phone calls, there was no sort of, mummy's just disappeared from the school play. I was there watching the school play, and they knew I was there. So I think that was the big thing. Boundaries for both of us. Boundaries for work and boundaries for the children.
Mm-hmm. On the subject of children and relationships, one of the things that I'm really interested in is education and teaching our children and the people of the future how to get the best of themselves, how to find their passions, find their strengths, find their place in life. So Carolyn, if you had a 5-year-old in front of you right now and you had to give them your advice and your wisdom on how they could live a life where they were happy, they were fulfilled, they were fulfilling their potential, what would you say to that 5-year-old?
Well, you see, you're starting off from the wrong premise there, because there's no way that I would try and advise a 5-year-old to do anything. And in fact, as you know, I am a coach, and the biggest thing about being a coach is, yes, I do have my store of knowledge now, but I can't tell anyone what to do, not even a 5-year-old. I mean, I can stop them from doing something dangerous that they're going to hurt themselves, but I did it with my children. I mean, it backfired slightly on me because I've always played sport, but I said to my children, what do you want to do? So they played some tennis, and I thought, well, they'll play tennis, and if they're good at that, they'll carry on playing tennis, and we'll try cricket, and we'll try rugby, and we'll try swimming, and they can choose whichever one they want to do. And I'm saying sport, but it applies to anything, I think. And then they said, I don't want to go to tennis anymore. So all I think you can really do with your children, so the advice I would give to parents is to let your children try as much as possible, but never put any pressure on them, because if they, just because you were good at squash or whatever it might be, your kid might hate racket sports, might hate sports, they might be a poet or a musician or whatever it is, and it's just to let them try as many things as they possibly can and see which ones they take to, and encourage them. And I find so many people, I'm afraid it still happens, try to live their lives through their children. The mistakes I made, my children aren't going to make. Well, they damn well are. Because they're human. And you can't be upset when they do it. So, same as with adults as a coach. It is letting people work out for themselves, encourage them, helping them to work out for themselves what it is they want to do with the children, and I think it's the same with adults, more so with children. Both my children play musical instruments, loved it. I remember my eldest one really loved playing the trumpet, played it from very young, played the trumpet really well, enjoyed it, went through different exams, 5 days before his grade 3, hated the trumpet, never wanted to play the stupid instrument. It was all my fault, and he was never going to pick it up again. He'd go one way, trumpet would go the other. So for 5 days, I insisted he practiced, I made it as fun as possible, and then after the exam, he loved the trumpet again, because that bit was over, and so we went through another 6 months, and he loved the trumpet until the minute. So you have to be aware, and that's the same as when you're older. There are times are tough, and it's so easy to walk away, and it's really handy to have someone else there at that point saying, do you really want to walk away? Are you really going to give everything up at this point? Just for the sake of, it doesn't matter if you make a mess of it, just keep going forward. And that's what the children is, just be encouraging. Never tell them they're silly, never tell them they're stupid, which so many people say.
Yeah, it's surprising how many people do. I think an airport is a place where you notice that the most. Sit in an airport and listen to what parents say to their children, and I think the patterns and beliefs that you are installing in your child right now, because of the way that you're speaking to them, is going to cause them a lot of trouble in the future, and you just don't realize it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I look back on what my poor parents said to me. I mean, they were very strict, and luckily I sort of rebelled and ignored them from the age of 14. But there was, when I got my youngest son, maybe my youngest son was a baby, but I remember I had my eldest son in the car, and it was a summer day, he wasn't at school, but we were driving along, I think I might have been dropping off at nursery school, and the windows were open, it was in London. Not that that's got anything to do with it, because it happens worldwide, I'm sure, but there were 3 mums walking along the pavement with a bunch of kids running, going to school, and I won't use their language because but one of the mothers said, "Get your effing backside back here," and the child, who was certainly no more than 7, probably I'd say 5, said, "You effing catch me, you old cow." And I was shocked. But then I thought of it, of course the kids talk like that, because
that's how their parents talk.
That's how the parents talk. And just that little incident taught me a lot. Not that I would say that to my child anyway, but the fact that it just mirrors them, so, from a very young age. And I thought, wow, So, yeah, I did learn that one. And also, the boundaries thing with kids. my kids did know that when I said no, I wasn't going to change my mind, unless something, there were occasions when something happened, but when it came to things like sweets or whatever, my kids weren't angels, but they did learn these certain lessons. It makes life so much easier for me. It all goes to making my work life easier, because when I said, no, you can't have sweets, they didn't get them because they started whinging at me and nagging at me and clawing at me. It just made me more determined to say, no, you'll have sweets on Saturday, but you're not getting them now. And I think if you have those firm it's not being mean, it's not being nasty, it's actually genuinely helping the children. My children went to lots of, as all children do, went round to other people's houses for tea, and gosh, I felt so proud, because without fail the parents said, your children are a pleasure to have here. So they actually had more fun because they were pleasant kids to be around. People like them. So it's not the advice to the children at all, it's encouraging the children. The advice to the parents is to be encouraging and to be set boundaries, not be scared of setting boundaries. But it works with adult life. If you think you can't drink alcohol if you've got a big meeting the next day, you learn that sort of restraint. It's not such a big thing, but it makes life so much easier.
Yeah. So
I'm babbling, I'm sure.
No, it's all useful babbling. As long as it's useful babbling, I'll let you babble away. So we've looked at children. I'd like to take things a little bit wider now and looking at communities and societies in general. How do we bring more love into the world?
Well, it still goes back to what I said about children. Somehow and I blame social media for a lot of that recently, but it's always been like it. Some people are anxious and worried, and I don't believe there are really very many people who are evil in the world. There's 2 or 3 people that might be. People aren't evil. People like to think, and this is definitely the case for starting a business, people like to think they're doing a good job. People don't want to go to work and not do very well. They feel so much better if they've done a good job. But it's so often the case that, I might want to make myself feel better and feel like I'm doing a better job than everyone else, but instead of working harder, I will try and push everyone else down, whereas actually, if you can encourage everyone around you, you will be buoyed up on that wave as well. And people are so angry. I don't know why everyone, it is. I heard, I can't remember the guy's name who wrote the book now, 12 Rules of Life.
Jordan Peterson.
He's that, well done, yes. He said just that people are just angry and they're looking for a cause to be angry with. They don't know what they're angry about. So if you present them with whether it's racism or the government or someone's got a big posh house that they can actually express, or the children. I mean, who would ever have thought that we would storm a hospital because there's a dying child in there, as happened in Liverpool. Some of those people would never have dreamt of doing that, but they suddenly had a cause that they could be passionate about. My big thing in general is to listen, and a lot of people really don't know how to listen. They hear what they want to hear, or what they expect to hear. You do it very well, I know you do, because you're not trying at this moment. You're not, you could, if we were having a conversation, you could easily butt into me and say your opinion, and I'd say my opinion. But when you're listening, you actually let the person finish saying what they're saying, unless they babble on for ages like I'm inclined to. And it's not just listening to what they're saying, it's also watching their body language and listening to what they're not saying. And is there something there they're scared of saying? Is there something there they really want to tell you but they're worried they might upset you? Is there a problem they have that they really need to offload, but no one is calm enough or patient enough to bother to give them the time to talk about it? They think that if they open their mouth, someone's going to tell them they're stupid or put them down or just get angry with them. So I think we all have this potential for keeping things inside us, and the trouble with keeping the things inside you, it builds up into a different emotion, and that might be fear, which causes anger. It might be anxiety, which causes anger. It might be frustration, which causes anger. And so if people actually just listened to other people and gave them time, I think it's just, no evangelist, but I think it is probably the greatest gift you can give to anyone, and I think it would help an enormous amount of people. As you know, I talk to people who've been raped and sexually abused, and actually that's completely wrong. I don't do the talking, I just do the listening, and so many people say you're the first person I've told what actually happened, and gosh, I feel better. Just that act of having someone hearing them. But I don't think it has to be anything traumatic. I mean, some of it really is traumatic, but it's not just the traumatic things, it's just having the time to listen to someone who's had a rubbish day at work, or had an argument with their next door neighbour, or their favourite pub's closed down. So, did that answer your question? I can't really remember your question.
Yes, I think it did. Bringing more love into the world.
Yes.
Listen to each other more. I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yes.
So, Carolyn, I have a few more questions to ask to round off our time together. But just because they're the last few questions, don't feel that you have to give short or succinct answers. They can be just as babbly as you want them to be. And I will sit here and I will listen, because we know the importance of listening. So my first question is, what are you grateful for?
Well, this is something I've thought about a lot, funny enough, many times over the years, because I realise I have been very lucky, and not least because I'm born in a body that works, that served me well, with a brain that functions pretty adequately, and that's, fantastic. And it has allowed me to achieve so many things. So I do think that's quite often, I really do believe that I'm lucky, because and I was born in England. A lot of people are born all over the world and just in very much worse conditions than I am. So being aware of that just makes me very aware that I've got, quite a few advantages before I even start. And of course, everyone's going to say, and I'm no exception, my two boys, fantastic, wonderful time, best thing that's ever happened to me, fantastic experience, love them both, even though they put me through one or two interesting moments. No, they are absolutely great. I have met some stunningly wonderful people, and that sounds like a slightly odd thing. I have met some famous people. I have met, through the real tennis, I've met several, I won't list them off, but several people that people know from television and film. Prince Edward. I've travelled round an awful lot of the world. I've been to a lot of Africa. I've been to Zimbabwe a couple of times before the Troubles, and since I've met some really, really interesting people. Not necessarily nice people always, but really interesting people who I've learned different things from. And the reason I'm saying all this is because it does reflect back to what I said initially. You know, if I'd been born in a lot of places, I'm a girl, for God's sake, as well. You know, I wouldn't have had the money, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do it. And 85% of my life, I'd say, I've been really lucky and managed to do whatever it is I wanted to do. I'm quite strong-willed, so, you know, I get up and I don't now so much, but, you know, in the past I just got up and travelled. I'm very lucky to be able to do that. You know, the time I took it for granted, I just set off. But now I realise that there's an awful lot of people that just can't do that for whatever reason. Yeah.
What legacy would you like to leave once you're gone?
Now that's a really difficult one, because despite talking a lot, I am not an arrogant person, I hope. I mean, I don't think I'm an arrogant person. So it's not some of the things that other people might say, but if people around me have just achieved something that they might not have achieved had I not come into their life, they not come into my life, I think that would be wonderful. I can't really know. I've honestly got no huge desire to be famous or tell people how they should be living their lives. I've not really got the wherewithal to change the education system, which I'd truly love to change, or the national health system, which I truly love to have a go at too. So I think those two are a bit out of the way, but if I can actually have inspired a few people who might be able to do that, then I think, wow, that would be amazing.
There's a word that's been capturing my attention and interest for the past couple of years, and that is the word authentic. And it's becoming a bit of a buzzword nowadays, yeah. Which is ironic that authentic is becoming a cliche, but that's another conversation. The word, nonetheless, is capturing my attention, and what really interested me was when I found out that the Latin root of the word authentic is author. So the original meaning of authentic is to be the author of your own life, and that's where I understood the concept of being the author of your life, creating the Author Your Life podcast. That's what authentic means to me. It's deciding who you want to be and what story you want to create in the world. For you, Carolyn, what does the word authentic mean?
Well, before you said your version of it, which of course is true, I think of it as being genuine. That form of it, and so it's very similar to what you're saying, because so many people put up a front or a face or a persona and they're not comfortable with it. It's so much easier to be yourself than it is to continually to pretend to be something else. And I also think it's so much more interesting for everyone else around you if you are who you truly, you present the front that you truly are. So that's what authentic means to me. It is to be genuine, but it also means, very much in the sense of what you've said, although I word it slightly differently, is so much as I think I have got lots of things going for me, and I occasionally hit stumbling blocks, but I take that responsibility. As you say, I am the author of my own life. It's not your fault if I've failed. It's my fault. And so that's what I really... It's taking responsibility. You say about writing your own life, I say it's about taking responsibility for my own life.
Yeah.
And not being angry with the rest of the world. Of course there are moments when I'll say, it's all their fault, I'm a wonderful person. But in my deep down, I know it's down to me to then stand up again and either put it right or run away. It's not down to someone else.
So Carolyn, for the people who've been listening to this and they've enjoyed what you have to share and they're interested in your story, I would like to find out a little bit more about what you do and the projects that you're involved in. Where would you suggest people go? Where would you direct them to?
Well, there's two. There's the one that you know well, which is purpleseed.com, which is for supporting people who are starting their own business. There are a lot of articles and interesting bits and pieces on there, as well as support. And the other one, as I said, is ifnotnow.org.uk. And if any of your listeners have got interesting and inspiring stories to share, then please go on there. We'd love to hear from you. It might be something that is enormous. You've jumped out of an aeroplane for the first time age 70, or run your first marathon after having an accident, anything like that. It could be as small as you like. It could be, David, because you've just knitted a fantastic jumper and you've never knitted before and you're proud of it. It could be because you've learned to speak a foreign language when you really struggled with any sort of education. It could be anything you like, but there's a lady on there who has walked the Pyrenees to celebrate her 60th birthday. So anything that for you is significant and other people. It can be big, but it doesn't have to be big. It can be small. So ifnotnow.org.uk. It'd be great to see you there too.
Well, Carolyn, thank you very much for joining us today. I've enjoyed your insight. I've enjoyed your honesty about challenge and struggle, and I think the audience will really benefit from what you've had to share today. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you, David, for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be, because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.